So welcome everybody to this afternoon's webinar, which is on how cyber criminals hack and how to protect your business. This is a joint presentation, and we've got a good panel of experts who we'll introduce to you shortly from three separate businesses. There's Kingston Smith, my own organisation, and my colleague Maritz, and we've got somebody from Glemnet and a couple of people from Scout as well, and we'll do some proper introductions shortly. I think welcome to you, and it's a very topical subject that we're going to be talking about today, and that's backed up by the number of you that have joined us today. I was just reading on today's BBC actually another article which was insurers defending covering ransomware payments, which basically was people were criticising the insurers, basically saying that you're effectively funding criminals if you do actually pay out on these ransomware payments, and the insurers have been defending themselves, saying that we're trying to keep the businesses alive, and this is one way of doing so. Certainly doesn't take away their primary responsibility for making sure that they don't get hacked, but it's a backup for them, some of these companies, to make sure that they don't fail. But it's a very topical subject, etc. Ruth, if you can just flip over the slides, what we'll do is quickly run through the agenda, and we've got. As a starting point, we'll do some introductions and welcomes, a bit more formally. Ruth, can you go to the next slide? And then we'll talk about the cybersecurity landscape. We'll have a demo, a couple of demos on some of the common hacks, and we'll look at some real life hacks there. We'll get James to demonstrate that. We'll look at some recommended actions, and we'll also look at building in some protection. How do you go about protecting yourself? And we'll have some Q&A as well. So we've got this. We've got you all in listen only mode, so you won't be able to unmute yourself. But if you do want to ask any questions, then please do so through the chat button. We will monitor what comes through the chat and try and answer that at the appropriate time. We may save that to the end, but if something comes up that's appropriate during the session, we'll answer those questions as we go. And without further ado, then I'll just show you all the panelists. So if we can go to the next slide. So we've got me. I'm the partner and head of the tech sector group at Kingston Smith. So that means I look after a lot of technology companies, principally of various sizes. And I'm pleased to welcome Glemnet, who are one of my clients. I've acted for Glemnet for around 15 years, and George will introduce himself shortly. We've also got Maritz, who's our own internal Director of Cybersecurity Services. So he provides advice and guidance on cyber. And then we've got a couple of guys from Scouts, and again, they'll introduce themselves to you as you go. Very brief introduction to the firm on the next slide. So for those of you that don't know, Kingston Smith is a leading firm of accountants. And as I've been saying actually to some of my colleagues just now, I've been talking a lot today on webinars, and I don't think I've actually mentioned anything to do with accounting all day. In fact, the only thing I think I've said is that we're a leading firm of accountants, but all my other subjects have been non-accounting based, which I suppose I'm quite amused and quite pleased about. And at the end of my last seminar, actually, somebody said to me, "Do I know a good accountant?" And I took it as something nice for somebody to say about me, that they hadn't noticed that I was an accountant throughout what I was saying. So our tech sector group focus on providing support to tech scale-ups. So we act, for all size companies, but we really enjoy working with some of the tech scale-ups, and we've had some good fun along the way with some of those people. We're about 600 people, 60 partners. We have an international network. We advise strategically to growth companies, and as I said, Maritz represents our specialist services, which includes data privacy, cyber, data security, and business continuity. And then I'll hand you over to George, who can introduce briefly Glemnet.
Thank you, Nick. My name is George Geddes, and I'm the IT and sales and cybersecurity sales manager here. And one of my roles here is to ensure that we educate our clients on the dangers associated in the cybersecurity world. So for us as a business, we've been around for many years, and our managing director Neil Linter has really focused the business on ensuring that we take pride in the level of service and professionalism that we offer to our customers. And with partners such as Scout, we're able to offer our clients very innovative and unique products and services to help businesses protect themselves. So, one of the services that we're very proud of here is our 24/7 threat detection and management service, which allows us to monitor clients' networks and step in if we do see any sort of problems. As a business, we've been around for a very long time. We are very experienced in this industry, and we're able to offer our customers the financial backing as well as the experience and the technical advances that are coming to the marketplace in recent times. The last year has been a very difficult time for the cybersecurity space, and we are getting more and more of our customers coming to us and saying, we've had this problem, we have this problem. Are you able to help? So we've really focused on strategic partnerships and partners like Scout, who we find are very innovative in the marketplace, and we are working very closely with them in helping them and us to deliver security and protection for the businesses and our clients. So I'll pass you over now to JP, and JP can say a little bit more around Scout.
Thank you, George. And just look at, I'll take you through a little bit about what we do and all of that, but really want to say thank you to everybody on the call, taking some time out. I hope everyone's well, which is the main thing. Nick, Moritz, and Ruth and George, thank you for the opportunity to jump on. As George said, and Nick, you alluded to, it's one of the big things right now for everybody. As you run your business, is really learn, educate yourself around cybersecurity, but also ensure that you have the right partnerships in place to help you. It's one of the issues that's going to become a little bit more obvious as this year progresses. Cybersecurity incidents, as George said, is on the rise. So we are Scout Cybersecurity. We partner with Glemnet, so we really help Glemnet's customers around cybersecurity. And I think we're actually celebrating our birthday this month, I think, as a company. So we've been 7 years up and running now. But in that time, a lot of things have not changed, in that they've actually got worse. When you think about cybersecurity, is typically seen as a difficult problem to solve that's expensive. And for particularly SMEs, small to medium businesses, making it easy and affordable is what the need is. And the other big driver really is this lack of talent. George and I speak to a lot of customers about this. There's a tremendous lack of talent globally. Wherever you sit in the world, getting access to cybersecurity talent to help you when you have a problem. So when you have a problem in your business, and some people on the call might already have experienced this, but in most cases, it's very, very difficult to know who to call. Who do you turn to? Where do you get help? So it's more important than ever to collaborate together. And this is why we love doing these calls, because it just helps promote good practice and for us all to get on the same page. So on the call, I run the business here in Europe for Scout, and James Mason's going to, he's one of our head senior engineers, going to run through how an attack happens, whether it's ransomware or business email compromise. So it's actually quite cool, how the attacker carries out these attacks, and it just might help raise awareness within your own organizations. And that's the main thing. But before James jumps in there, and Ruth, if it's okay, if you can go to the next slide, that'd be great. This is one of the key things, I think, messages from us today, everybody. It's really how we look at both the problem and the solution. So when you think about basic cyber hygiene, so as we go through this, just I'll only take a second, but if you think about your own business and like what data are you trying to protect? What data in your organization? And Moritz is probably going to touch on this later in terms of data categorization, but at a very high level, what's important to your business? Is it the HR information, financial information, your email? making sure you have a good grasp on where that data resides. And the second part of the puzzle is really around building what's called concentric rings of security around that data. So what's that mean? Some people call it the cyber kill chain. So at a very, very simple level, again, it's really what controls have you in place to protect it? So you think about firewall or endpoint security, authentication devices, making sure your staff are trained. So for example, if a firewall misses something, which happens, what else is there to pick it up? And partners like Glemnet or your IT providers, they're going to do that piece of work for you. So making sure you have good concentric rings of security around your data, and take the advice of your IT providers in that respect. Where we tend to come in, or any other provider like us, is one of the issues right now today is that there's so much data. There's so many devices, so much data being created within your organization, whether it's a log on or whether it's a network activity. And those security events that are created within your environment, nobody's looking at them, because again, it's controls that you have in place doing a job. But if there is bad actors or malware events that are happening within that environment, they may be logged as a security log, but nobody's looking at them actively. So collecting those security logs in one place, some people might recognize the term SIEM or SOC provider, but really having a partner that's going to take all of that headache away from you. Monitoring is key. Very simple analogy: when you're leaving your home, those that can, you lock your doors and windows, and it's like firewalls and endpoint security securing your home. But the monitoring, if somebody's running around in your home, is there alarms going off to tell you that's happening? And in the UK at the moment, the average length of time from when something happens in your environment to when you know about it is 197 days. So like 200 days is a long time not to know that you have a problem. So again, taking that response time down is key. Working with a partner like Glemnet, Neil and George and the team there do a marvelous job integrating our technology, but ultimately taking that response time down, and then picking a framework that makes sense. So like, what does good look like across people, process, and technology? In our world, staying still is not an option. You have to continuously ensure that your cyber posture is moving forward. So again, making sure you're having awareness of frameworks on cybersecurity, but again, a partner that's going to guide you through that process. But ultimately, that visibility piece is one of the key aspects. So, look, again, don't want to, maybe if you want to take down the screen for a second, Ruth. Definitely we don't want to do death by PowerPoint, but sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier. But I think, folks, that's one of our key messages. Partner that helps you guide you along the journey on cybersecurity. Think about those concentric rings of security, visibility, know you have a problem. So monitoring is key. So those that are not on the call today, one question is your environment, your network been monitored? Your Office 365 environment, your infrastructure. Is there somebody looking at those security logs? And that's one of the key things. So, James, I'm going to hand over to you. I know you have a couple of things to show us, but really, and George, I think you're going to jump in then as well afterwards. But maybe, James, if it's okay, you might walk us through from an attacker's perspective. So when you think about bad actors out there, what are these guys doing? What does it look like for people on the call, in terms of their own environment? It'd be great if you could walk it through.
Yeah, sure thing, JP. Happy to. So I'm just going to share up my screen now and kind of introduce you to the tools I'm working with here, and kind of, like JP said, walk through kind of a day in the life of a hacker. The people that we love out there. So give me 1 second here. Bring this up. Cool. So to intro this, this is my attack machine. So you've got kind of the two panes in front of you there. The left-hand side of the screen is my attack machine. So it's a very popular flavor of Linux that will be seen in pen testing and the cybersecurity world, and obviously, you know, the malicious side of cybersecurity as well. And the right-hand side of the pane is my attack email. So this is where the attack is going to start from. So what we have here is a pretty standard tool that's going to basically build a link for us and build a page for us that will be an attack page, and it's actually going to harvest credentials. And you can see in this case, I've selected option 4. We're just going to let this run through. It takes a few seconds, but I've selected option 4 to use Microsoft. Select my host, which in this case, I'm using a popular attack email host. And there we go. We've now got that link. And all I need to do with this is actually just push this into my email here. And I've already created that email there on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to paste that link. And you can see this email looks fairly standard with a Microsoft email. You know, it looks like a pretty good security alert from the Microsoft team. And I've already put the header on the front of the email there, so you can see Microsoft account security alert. You know, and 99.999% of the time, you're going to see Microsoft account security alert. You're going to see an email that looks very similar to a Microsoft email, and we're going to go ahead and send that. And you know, we're just going to accept that it's a Microsoft email. So here I've just transitioned over. So this is my victim machine, if you will. So this is where the email is going to come into. And we'll give it a second. Maybe there we go. So emails come in. We're going to click that link that I just sent through. And here we've got a standard Microsoft login. So if I just put my credentials in here, and again, you know, this is my my victim machine here. And put my super secure password in and sign in. Now, if we transition back over, obviously an end user just sat there like, why is it not logging in? We can see here that I now have the login information. So you can see down where my cursor is, I have the account email address. I already knew that because I already sent the email out, but the thing I didn't have was the password. So from here now, I can go ahead and copy these out. And you can see on my attack machine here, if we log in using the username, grab that password, there we go, drop that in there. And yeah, standard Microsoft stuff. And now I'm in that victim's email. And from here, I have the ability to start clicking around and doing whatever I want. One of the major things that we're seeing is, and one of the major attack vectors is kind of a wire fraud. So I'm going to go ahead and set this up here. Let me make this a little bigger here. There we go. So I'm going to set up a forwarding rule in this case. So you can see there, the subject includes, I'm going to go for wire transfer. And what I'm doing here is I'm basically saying if an email comes in with anything to do with wire transfer, I'm going to forward it out to my attack email. So give me a second. There we go. And this is one of the most common ways of a malicious third party being able to access an email and access maliciously email here. So I'm back on my victim's machine again, and that new rule has taken hold. So from here, let's give it a second, maybe see if it comes in. Give it another refresh. There we go. So I now have an email that's come in with wire transfer information. So obviously that rule that I set up says anything to do with wire transfer, if it has wire transfer in it, forward it out to my attack email. And now from there, I have those credentials to do that attack. And yeah, we can see there it took a second to come through. But if I go back to my attack machine, that email is forwarded over to me. So now from here, I have those wire transfer instructions. I have the whole email. I have the ability now to steal the information of that organization using that wire transfer information and steal money from them. This is one of the most common attacks we're seeing. The other side of this is, if I wanted to go one step further with this, I could have set to delete the email from the end user afterwards. But the biggest problem here, and I'm going to pull down my share here now, the biggest problem we're seeing is end users don't even realize this has happened. You saw that I put the rule name as admin. No one's going to really question that. We'll call it something really standard that no one will ever notice. And if I even go through and delete that email afterwards, no one will be any the wiser. They just think they've not given me emails. And there I can now start stealing the money of that organization. So it's kind of a run through of that side of things.
That's really interesting, James, that you've brought that up. I received an email yesterday, personally, from a solicitor company that we used for purchase of our house, and it was the same thing. They were alerting us to the fact that they were alerted by their clients that there have been a number of people that were contacted asking for the transfer and a change of wire details. So you can imagine, somebody's buying a house, you're talking a few £100,000, and it's a huge problem for the industry. But one of the other questions I always seem to get when I'm speaking to clients is around ransomware. Everybody is always asking about how it works and things like that. So are you able to quickly show us what a ransomware attack looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, happy to. So I got another machine that I'll bring up in a second, and it's really interesting. Ransomware has been around since, well, I think it was 1989. The first variant of ransomware came out with the AIDS Trojan. And they just sent around floppy disks. That one failed because the guy put his address on there for them to send the money to, and then he'd send back the decryption key. So you can imagine he got a very nice knock at his door from the FBI that way. But they've got more and more sophisticated as the years go on. So let me share my screen out. And like I said, I've got a new attack vector system here. So there we go. So yeah, this is standard Windows desktop. And just to set the scene for a second here, obviously we've all just, I say we've all just come off of the Christmas holiday break there. It seems like a lifetime ago now for sure. But a lot of the times, anytime we go away from our machines, whether it's the weekend, we're going on a holiday where, whatever that may be, we potentially leave our system on. And in this case, we did. We left our system on, and I'm coming back to the first day here, and we can see I'm just about to launch Chrome. I'm getting here, starting my day. The problem here being is I don't remember that Chrome.exe file wasn't there to start with, and you can see all of these things are popping up on my desktop now. And I'm getting some weird icons. Now, as an end user, I'm just sat here thinking, oh, that's a bit weird. Maybe it's a new system that was installed by my IT provider or something along those lines. It's fine, and if I was an impatient human being, I'd probably click on Chrome.exe about 1,000 more times and try and force it to come through. But what's actually happening here is the entire system is being encrypted. Now, the encryption that they're using, again, if you take it way back when ransomware first started, it was a very basic encryption. It was a case of using a very simple password that probably could have been cracked very easily. The problem now being, we're seeing very sophisticated keys that, they're saying that if you started trying to decrypt one of these keys today, so if, once this ransomware has taken hold of the system, if I tried to decrypt it right now with a standard PC, the decryption would continually go long after our universe has gone out of existence. And that's how powerful these encryption keys are. So we can see that the encryption is still taking hold. It does take a couple of seconds because it has to go through every file on the system and run that. And there we go. We're now seeing my backdroppers, my background here has changed. And as an end user, I'm terrified. What do I do now? What is this? What does this mean? And I have no access to my files. I have no access to any systems I want. And the worst part about this is a lot of ransomwares will now traverse through the network as well. So it's not just me that I've just completely screwed over. It's everyone else on the network as well. You know, and you can see it's asking me if I want to open things, and it's really taking hold of this system quite dramatically and really, you know, screwing everything up. And then finally, here we go. We've got this WannaCry decryptor message come up. It's deleted out all of my files. I'm left with the encrypted versions of them. And you can see this is actually kind of an earlier version of WannaCry here. It's only asking for about $300 worth of Bitcoin. We're seeing that last year, the average price of a decryption key, and the average price that they wanted to decrypt your data was around about $100,000. So, you know, it's grown exponentially over the years, and it's only going to grow more because, you know, people are attacking left, right, and center. And it's unfortunately very simple now to get these attack vectors. So it just kind of gives you a view into what a ransomware would do should it get hold of the system, you know, and how it would go through and encrypt the system there. So yeah, hopefully that kind of gives you all an idea of, you know, some of the dangers out there within the internet world.
Thank you, James. I've seen that before from you, but it's no less scary however many times you see it, I have to say. I'm going to launch a poll in a minute and ask you a couple of questions just to see what the kind of things that you're interested in. But I'll just share a couple of things again that I gleaned from the press towards the end of last year. So one of the problems with this cyber security is that companies are getting fined and almost through no fault of their own. It's sort of they've got in through the back door of their own sort of security systems. And the two examples I wanted to give you were Ticketmaster, who were fined 1.25 million over a payment data breach. And actually the Information Commissioner's Office had some sympathy with them because the breach had actually come through a chatbot and was a weakness of the provider of the chatbot to them, and they'd kind of, you know, at their own goodwill tried, you know, use the chatbot to hadn't noticed that anything had gone wrong, and it was the supplier that had caused the issue. So, you know, so for those tech companies that are out there listening today, I think you need to be, you know, 100% sure that you have your own data hygiene so that you're not, you know, the cause of the problem. So Ticketmaster fined 1.25 million, even though the Information Commissioner's Office had a lot of sympathy for them, etc. And similarly, Marriott, who were fined 18.4 million for holiday guest data breach. Marriott, their issue, and sorry, on Ticketmaster, going back to something that JP was saying before, I think it took them 4 years to discover the data breach actually. So adding to your average number of days that it had taken. And I think one of the things they were really told off about was how long it had taken them to recognize the issue, even though several people had been telling them about it. And Marriott, similarly, you know, that also came in back through the back door, where again the Information Commissioner's Office felt sorry for them. They had acquired a business, and the failure came from the acquired business. And you know, again, you might say not their issue, but it's about being very careful to make sure that, you know, your suppliers, and if you are an IT company, making sure that you are very careful about things that you provide to your customers. So Ruth, do you want to just launch a quick poll? I think there's only one question with a small number of options. There you go. So if you could just click on which one of these is your favorite, let's say. So what do you see as your biggest threat? Please select one from the list below. So that's ransomware, phishing, insider threats, and network breaches. And if you just give you a few moments to vote on that one. And while I do that, while we do that, as we gather the information on that, I'll introduce Maritz, who's one of my colleagues. Actually, the other thing that's interesting on today's call is what's interesting on all our calls lately. Actually, is we'll get a little window into people's homes, and we've actually got people on, you know, in three very different places on the call today. We've got James, although he sounds very English, he's actually in the States. We've got JP, who does sound very Irish, and he is in Ireland, where he's on the continent in Europe, which the rest of us are not. We've got Moritz, who is in England, but you'll hear him in a minute. He doesn't sound very English. And then you've got a couple of us in England. So it's a very international group you've got on the call today. But Moritz is one of my colleagues. Moritz leads on our cyber services, and Moritz is going to share some stuff with you. I think, Ruth, hopefully you've had enough responses on that, and you can take that poll down, and we'll share the results with you shortly. And then perhaps we'll share a couple of slides which Moritz is just going to talk you through.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick. I'd just like to add to the ransomware discussion as well, to highlight that ransomware has actually developed in the sort of way that it attacks these days. And not only do they actually encrypt the data, but often they actually steal the data before they encrypt as well. So what they'll do, what ransomware attackers will do now, is they will actually tell you your data has been encrypted, but they'll actually try and extort money out of you two ways. Firstly, to get the data back, and secondly, not to release the data publicly. And actually, there's been a lot of quite public incidents where they called the ransom, or called the criminal gangs bluff, and the data was actually released. So, and the scary bit of that's obviously there's a data protection issue around that as well. So the problem is becoming a lot more complex than just data loss. It actually leads back to sort of loss of data from a data protection perspective as well. And then I'd just like to share a very quick story as well about linking back to the first demonstration that James gave us around the business email compromise, or the wire fraud. We were working with a small charity last year, probably around June time, so at the sort of top end of when the coronavirus really hit, and they actually suffered the business, or almost suffered a business email compromise attempt in almost exactly the way that James just displayed, where one of their employees' email accounts were actually hacked by that person's credentials being stolen in a phishing email. And obviously they were monitoring this guy's email address or email account, and he was actually responsible for telling third parties to pay beneficiaries. This was a charity that sort of distributed cash for good causes. What happened in this case was the employee legitimately sent a payment request for about £80,000 to a third party. Literally 4 hours later, a replica email went out to that same third party, asking them just all they needed to change was to change the bank account because they got the bank account details wrong. That was obviously the compromised email. Luckily, the third party spotted it before they processed the data, and got back to the client, in which case that's basically when they called us in to help them with the incident response. So they're very lucky they didn't lose any money at that point in time. However, what did happen was a potential client who was the National Lottery actually got wind of this incident, and that almost caused them to lose an opportunity to win a contract to administer about £2 or £3 million worth of lottery funding. So I think what I'm trying to demonstrate here is not just necessarily the technical aspects that's the concern. Some of the pain actually comes afterwards, and it's the fallout as well. The other bit I'll also like to highlight is this employee was actually based in Spain due to COVID. But when we actually tracked the source of the attacker was based in Slough. So it's not that we're talking about international attackers. Cyber criminals are amongst us, basically. So I think it's just bringing back home the fact that it's a real issue. It's an issue everybody should be worried about. And there's a lot that should be done around cybersecurity. So what I wanted to share with you today was just sort of where I think the 5 key areas are that organizations need to start spending time on to be able to deal with the cybersecurity issue. So the first area I'd like to highlight is the importance of senior management engagement. Now, whether we like it or not, senior management explicitly or implicitly defines the company's risk appetite and ultimately sets the tone from the top, which then sends a clear message whether cybersecurity is or isn't one of the company's priorities. Ultimately, that's a lead factor in determining how much time, money, and effort can be spent in this area. And when I go into a client and I hear that, as a cybersecurity professional, I hear that senior management actually supports cybersecurity efforts, that means half the battle is already won. Actually, just having the willingness and the funding and the support to be able to implement the right level of controls. However, we do understand that the board and senior management have got a lot of competing priorities. So getting the board and senior management involved is difficult. And it also doesn't help because where for a lot of senior management, they just consider cyber to be a purely IT issue. So one of the areas that we usually point our clients to is the UK National Cybersecurity Centre has got a cybersecurity board toolkit, which is a really good starting point to help break down this barrier. It helps senior management develop that understanding and appreciation of cybersecurity risk as it relates to their own business, and it sort of helps embed the topic into board level agenda as a board level agenda item as well, as it should. And mainly because things like cybercrime costs the UK economy, I think it was 160 billion a year or something ridiculous. It's a huge amount of money. So it has to be a management issue, to this, a top-down management issue. The second point I'd like to cover off is sort of touching with what JP mentioned as well, and that's the importance of understanding where your business crown jewels are kept from an IT perspective and from that side of things. When ultimately, when you look at cybersecurity, and again, JP and both James sort of touched on the fact that it's very similar to physically securing a home or premises. You need to understand what is most important to protect, how valuable it is to you, how and where you're vulnerable to a break-in, and how much you're willing to invest to protect the property from a physical security perspective. So if you look at that from a cybersecurity standpoint, it is really important to identify where you're particularly dependent on IT for the continuity of your business operations. And this may be as simple as just the fact that you've got staff laptops and staff desktop computers, which is absolutely key to the operation of your business. But it may also be key business applications, or even in some cases, computerized manufacturing systems. The other aspect to consider to understand where those sort of crown jewels are is understanding where you hold sensitive information. And sensitive information can be anything from personal information, commercially sensitive, valuable intellectual property. So this will also help identify where to focus your efforts, and will give you an indication of the range of attackers to consider as well. For example, it may just be that opportunistic cyber criminals might attack you because you don't necessarily deal with anything particularly sensitive, but you may be working for the MOD or for other sort of sensitive customers, in which case you may actually be targeted by well-resourced state-sponsored groups. I mean, the other area to think about is where your organization may also be a little bit more sensitive to cyber attacks. For example, your staff might not be particularly IT savvy and could therefore be taken in by phishing emails like James demonstrated. Or you may actually run services that customers access over the internet. And I think the problem with the internet, or the good thing about the internet, is if the service is accessible to your customers, it might also be accessible by cyber criminals. And if you've got particular weaknesses in that area, they would definitely take advantage of it. So thirdly, I think just touching base on sort of adopting the framework side of things as well, ultimately your business budget and risk appetite will determine where you focus security, but it is sometimes quite hard to figure out where to start. And this is where the framework piece comes in quite usefully. Ultimately, you don't have to figure a lot of these things out from scratch. A lot of that information is already in existing frameworks, and I've highlighted a couple down there. We talked about basic cyber hygiene. So the UK Cyber Essentials scheme is actually pretty good at helping implement some of the basic cybersecurity hygiene factors within your systems. But once you've done that, you can ultimately you have to continuously improve your cyber defenses. Effectively, you can start looking at other frameworks like the National Cybersecurity's 10 Steps to Cybersecurity, which give you another little bit of a depth of the kind of security you can look at. And as you mature over time, you can move towards other frameworks like the CIS Top 20, NIST Cybersecurity Framework, or even ISO 27001. All really, really good best practice frameworks that'll help you sort of mature where you're going to. The other bit about frameworks to note as well is certification against some of those frameworks, like Cyber Essentials or 27001, is slowly but surely creeping into the requirement for tenders and contracts. So not only will you strengthen the fundamental cyber resilience of your business as well, it might even make you more likely to win work through the sort of more formal tender and contract piece. Ruth, if you don't mind going to the next page. Whilst we're waiting for the slide to change, I'll just talk about it quickly. I'd also like to build on what James and JP saying about having the technical capability of being able to detect that you've got a breach or not. And often you'll need a partner to be able to help you develop that if you don't have those sort of skills in-house. But what I would also like to highlight is, as an organization, you also need to be prepared to respond effectively to a major incident. So this is more around around having sort of response plans and so on to sort of help you respond and actually plan to respond to a security incident. So for example, if you had a major theft or ransomware attack on the business, how would you respond? What immediate actions must be taken? Who's responsible for managing the incident? Who should be involved? Things like how do you deal with the legal and reputational issues associated with a cyber attack? Another good question is, how do you even invoke your cybersecurity insurance cover? I mean, you may have it, but what's the steps you need to follow to actually make that happen, to help you out in that specifically sticky situation? And then also, what about engaging with customers, engaging with the customer, like the Information Commissioner's Office if it's personal data? So there's a lot to consider. And especially when you're in the middle of an incident, you don't want to have to work it out from scratch. So all I'm saying here is you should really consider thinking about how you plan for a breach if it does happen, and putting a lot of those sort of mechanisms and thinking in place before you actually have to sort of deal with a security breach or security incident. And then the last area I'd just like to highlight, and actually touches on a little bit of what Nick said as well, which is looking at your supply chain, because fundamentally a lot of their security weaknesses could potentially put you at risk. Ultimately, they're just businesses in their own right, so they'll be exposed to many of the same cybersecurity risks that you are. And they often hold information about your organization, your staff, and your customers. They might even have direct access or manage your IT system, so they may actually be your IT service provider. So ultimately, their risk is also your risk. And the sort of recommendation here really is to make sure that you can start driving cybersecurity maturity through your own supply chain. And you can do that through understanding the security risks your suppliers pose to you, starting to carrying out due diligence on supply security measures, and also encouraging or mandate, if you want to, through contracts, the adoption of frameworks such as Cyber Essentials and ISO 27001 for your suppliers as well. So I guess just to recap the 5 points. First one is get management buy-in. Second one is understand IT and data, and your IT and your data environment from a crown jewels perspective. Adopt a framework, plan for operational response to a cyber attack, and don't forget about your supply chain. So that's me. Thanks, Nick. Back over to you.
Thank you, Moritz. We'll share the results of the poll in a minute, and also if you have got any questions, please do pop them in the chat. We've got a few at the moment which we'll come back to. We'll come across. I'll try and put them back to the appropriate person. But thanks everybody for your input so far. I was just going to share a quick story about a client of mine. So one of my clients is a tech company that is a blockchain developer, and they have put together built exchanges for cryptocurrency trading, and they've been paid quite a lot in cryptocurrency. So they hold significant bands of cryptocurrency worth many tens, if not hundreds of millions now. And obviously, when we talked about what are your crown jewels, etc., for them, obviously, they need to keep control of their cryptocurrency and ensure that they don't. Then somebody doesn't come and steal those. We've seen lots of stories in the press again, actually, about people who've lost the code to their cryptocurrency and so forth. But for these clients who are Nordic clients of ours, I asked the question just earlier this week, and I said, what security do you have around the storage of your cryptocurrency? And his answer mainly to me was that if I told you, I'd have to kill you, because then you'd be able to access it. But he did say, in general terms, I can give you the general outline of what we do. And it was very interesting to me to see the kind of levels to which they would go to protect such an asset. And it does kind of cut across the physical security and the data security and then all the IT security. That, for example, they have 3 signatories required for any of their cryptocurrency to be accessed. Those 3 signatories can be spoken to on mobile phone devices, which are used only for for approving the sale of cryptocurrency. Those mobile phones are never otherwise connected to the internet, and they're kept in 3 separate lock safes. In order to demonstrate that this worked for me, and it's sort of in the opposite way, the way that James showed you how easy it was to breach it, he showed me he's one of the signatories. He showed me if I try and do it on my own, I will fail. And he showed me, trying to sell some cryptocurrency, and it failed, etc. But it was fascinating to me to see the very deep level of security, which combines physical and data security, the sort of things we've been talking about today across that piece. Ruth, I don't know if you're able to share the results of the poll. I haven't seen them so far. But otherwise, so I think, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on those findings, but I suppose they're not surprising. I know we've done this very similar poll previously. Is that the sort of results you've seen before, JP?
Absolutely. George and I probably see this all the time. I think one of the messages we had earlier, and I see some questions in the chat as well. So phishing as an example, you know, is one of the most common methods for bad actors to begin the process of executing something on your network. So if you haven't already seen it, you're going to see more and more of it. Remember, I think one of the messages today is that you have to have a layered approach. So having things like strong email protection in place, training your staff, having conversations with your staff. So going back today and even mentioning some of the things you've seen and heard today is going to raise awareness within your organization. As humans, it's just we're our own best forms of defense in terms of that human firewall. So, you know, that's something you can do today and just create that awareness. But phishing itself, there's obviously technical controls. And George, you probably have a range of different maybe suggestions here.
Absolutely, JP. So depending on who you ask, 93% of all attacks happen through phishing now. And because of COVID, employees are 5 times more likely to click on ransomware and phishing emails. So the threat has now almost increased by an incredible amount based on the changes that we're going through in the world. So just to reiterate your point, it's a combination of different things. You've got to have the technical controls in place. You've really got to educate your end users, and you've got to continuously train them, and you've got to continuously monitor, because no one system is going to be foolproof, and having multiple layers in place in terms of protecting the emails that are coming through is important to help fight against it. And one area that a lot of people don't really focus on is cybersecurity awareness training. It's not sufficient enough for you to just do an initial training at induction. You've got to train constantly. You have to have a program in place that is long term. And you've got to make sure that your staff really understand the importance of being able to spot some of these attacks. And one area that a lot of people don't seem to focus on is that we all learn at different paces, and we all absorb information differently. So having standardized sort of training programs for everybody doesn't really get that effective training across. So this is something that we really look at when we're doing the initial assessments, and really having to sit down with a company and really understand how they perceive threats within their businesses, and then putting together a long-term program in terms of improving that cyber hygiene. A lot of organizations just think that it's a case of I'll just buy antivirus or just install a firewall, and we'll see you next year at the renewal of the services on the firewall or the antivirus. It's security hygiene is a long-term project, and it needs to be ingrained in the ethos and everyday workings of a business. And your employees have to be the core focus of that protection.
There's a couple of very specific questions in the chat, and I know you might have answered one or two of them. But one of them, the question is the framework is IASME governance the same as NIST? And so I think it's worth sharing that more widely. James, I think you can cover that one.
Yeah, sure thing. Yeah, so obviously when you're looking at governance and compliancy and regulatory bodies behind you, there are an absolute ton in the world. Just to expand really quickly on the IASME, which is very hard to say. So it's information assurance for small and medium enterprise. So it's a governance standard that basically it was created for small and medium businesses, and it's kind of a step above UK Cyber Essentials. So it's focused around risk. It encompasses GDPR into it as well. So, you know, it's a very good one to kind of protect on a kind of a level above. Now, by no means am I cheapening the UK Cyber Essentials at all. You know, it's a fantastic place to start. This will give you kind of that step up and really enforce the mandatory GDPR side of things as well. Now, on the other side, when we're talking about NIST, NIST is a US-based one. So it's the US National Institute for Standards and Technology. And it's a framework. And NIST is more of an internationally recognized one, you know, whereas the IASME is very much focused around the UK and encompassing EMEA with that GDPR side of things. NIST is internationally focused. The one thing about NIST, it's going to be, again, another step up, but it doesn't encompass GDPR. So that's something you'd have to take into consideration outside of that. Being, you know, as you know, everyone on this call today is, you know, a UK-based business. UK Cyber Essentials is definitely kind of point one. You know, if you wanted to look into the IASME, I really need to stop saying that because I can't say it. Then absolutely, you know, that's definitely a conversation to have with the team today, you know, as kind of a follow-up and see if it is something that would be beneficial for the organization as a whole. Like I said, you know, if GDPR is very much a thing on your radar, I would go down that route. So it encompasses, it forces a mandatory GDPR side of things as well.
And Maritz, or Nick, it's okay. I have a question for Maritz, I suppose, or more of a comment. So we're a cybersecurity company, and we very much focus on cybersecurity. And the mindset there is that, you know, being compliant doesn't necessarily mean you're secure, but being secure can often, let's say, take some of the requirements on compliance side of things. And generally, we're seeing more and more compliance. I'm just interested, Maritz, you'll have an insight. The common aspects, so you pick NIST, ISO, ISME, there's probably common security related aspects that you'll see across them, and you're going to see them more by sectors. If you're in healthcare, there's something else, and I think it's going to be a reality for us all as you see more compliance. But what are the main aspects that you're seeing across each of them?
I think the main aspect is having a risk-based approach. Okay. And because you literally just implementing security controls might sort of tick some of the boxes from a compliance perspective, but I think people often see compliance as a silver bullet, saying if you tick all those boxes, you'll also be secure. Mm-hmm. You need to have a really good understanding of your own security risk. And for example, IASME, we're a certification body for IASME as well, so we do certify companies to IASME. But one of the key things we drive through comes back to sort of understanding what is the specific risk to your business. Because if you don't understand the risk to your business reasonably well, you're not going to know whether the controls you put in place is actually going to be effective in the first place. So it does come back to that aspect. And I think the other bit that I guess there's a slight difference between IASME and NIST, for example, is IASME is probably more process focused. So it's more about how you manage things and making sure you manage security in a fairly consistent manner and do the right things around it, where NIST probably provides that as well, but it might be a bit more prescriptive in terms of exactly what you need to do. And that's quite a good example between the American approach and the UK approach. The UK approach is always a bit more principle based, where the US is thou shalt do this in this specific way. And I think that's probably the other bit I'd contrast as well, which James hopefully will agree with me as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thanks for that question, JP, because I think that's a really good way to kind of round up the kind of specialisms you've got around on the screen today. Some of you do slightly different things, but together what you do covers all bases, as in you've got the kind of technological solution and the kind of approach to risks solution as well. So the combined impact is the answer to your question, JB, is what is required, isn't it? You can't just say, oh, great, I bought something, it does it for me. You then have to have processes internally to make sure that you're making use of those, and you keep it under review to make sure that there's no other gaps. There don't seem to be any more questions, but I know the panelists will be very happy to take any questions from you, and we will share contact details on the next slide or two. Ruth, if you could just put up the slides just one last time. We'd be very happy. Thank you for attending. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. I always like to see James's. James always steals the limelight by showing us how hacking really works. But we would be delighted to take these conversations further, either on an informal basis one-to-one, or if any of you are interested, we can offer you a free cybersecurity risk assessment, and we will be sending out something to you after we close here, just to gather your feedback. And if you're interested, you can request your free cybersecurity check. I don't know if there's anybody else who wants to add anything. I'd want to say my thanks to all of you. It's been fascinating hearing you all again. It's a really fascinating subject, and I'm sure we could have chatted for longer and seen more demonstrations of the devil at work, etc. Amusingly for me, while we were speaking, it flashed up on my screen from my Norton. This is on my home little laptop. On my Norton LifeLock, it says dark web activity detected. And we detected personal information on the dark web which may belong to you. And I'm thinking, well, that's marvelous. Someone's attacking me just because I'm talking about cybersecurity now. I'll have to follow that up and see where that's got to. But you know, it's all around us, and we need to be careful and take advice and get the things right. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has anything to add before we wrap up. But thanks everybody. Thanks for attending as well.
Thanks for having us, Nick.
Yeah, thanks everybody. So we'll close the webinar at this point. Thanks very much.